Last night, or today on Singapore time, we had a historic summit between President Donald Trump and President Kim Jong-un of North Korea. I know because ABC interrupted the equally important Bachelorette episode to show it that I was watching. The gall of them. But in all seriousness, I happen to believe that it was a great moment. Yes, it was largely symbolic. It was a photo op. But optics matter, and FDR sat down with Stalin, so I'm not comparing Trump to FDR, of course, one of our worst presidents, Trump, maybe to one of our best, but I do think it's important to remain consistent, and any move towards peace should be praised. Here are some of the details from that summit that emerged this morning. President Trump shook hands with Kim Jong-un of North Korea on Tuesday and offered a major concession during the first summit meeting between their nations, a momentous step in an improbable courtship between the world's largest nuclear power and the most reclusive one. Emerging from a day of talks in Singapore and speaking to reporters for more than an hour, Mr. Trump said that he was suspending joint military exercises with South Korean forces and that he was confident Mr. Kim would begin dismantling his nuclear arsenal very quickly. But Mr. Trump said economic sanctions against the North would remain in place until the North did more. The deal the two men agreed to, as Ann Applebaum points out, is similar to previous agreements in its vagueness, and those were followed by a North Korea buildup. But for all this, as long as they are talking, war is less likely. Any talks, while ongoing, significantly reduce the risk of a nuclear war that could kill millions, says Max Fisher of the New York Times. An empty Trump-Kim statement is a normal, low-pressure way to keep that process going. So some of the more nuanced criticism, in my opinion, has pointed out that while we suspended military exercises, we didn't get an equivalent gesture from North Korea. And I understand that. And we gave North Korea more than that, too, really. So legitimacy on the international stage was huge for them by posing with the U.S. leader, as dumb as that may sound. But here's what we did avoid. Nuclear war. Remember when Trump tweeted just this year that his nuclear button was much bigger and more powerful than Kim's? And with John Bolton as Donald Trump's national security advisor, war with North Korea was seemingly more likely than ever. But this diplomacy, initially catalyzed by President Moon of South Korea, we need to completely mention that all the time, has significantly reduced that likelihood. Donald Trump, for whatever reason, has switched from bloviating and aggressively taunting North Korea, Rocket Man, to wanting to encourage peace. He demonstrated this amazing switch in perspective on ABC last night.
And I'm doing something that I've wanted to do from the beginning. We stopped playing those war games that cost us a fortune. You know, we're spending a fortune every number of months. We're doing war games with South Korea. And I said, what's this costing? We're flying planes in from Guam and we're bombing empty mountains for practice. And I said, I want to stop that and I will stop that. And I think it's very provocative, especially, George, since we're getting along. In other words, we're in the process of signing something. Excuse me?
Did you talk about pulling troops out, U.S. troops out of South Korea?
We didn't discuss that, no, but we're not going to play the war games.
He went on to repeat that statement again in the interview with Stephanopoulos. Look, I'll take it. I am down for de-escalation, but some people aren't. And it really is some of the usual suspects, neocons, on both sides of the aisle. Listen first to what Lindsey had to say this morning on NBC after being asked about Trump removing troops and stopping the war games that Trump said in that interview.
So that's a major concession by the U.S. Did the U.S. give more than it got today?
I don't think canceling a war game is going to matter over the arc of time. The one thing that I would violently disagree with is removing our troops. I can't imagine I would vote for any agreement that requires us to withdraw our forces, because that would destabilize Asia. That's what China wants. That doesn't make the world more peaceful. It makes it more dangerous. The goal is for them to give up their weapons program, missiles and bombs in return for security and prosperity. Senator Schumer, a Democrat, has laid out a deal I could accept. The only way you're going to get that deal is to convince North Korea that if they do not take the peace route, we will use military force as a last option. We're going to end this program one way or the other. It's not if, it's how, and it's when. And I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm very pleased with President Trump thus far, but we've got a long ways to go. They've done this twice, and we can't let them do it a third time.
So he name-dropped Chuck Schumer multiple times throughout this interview. Why? because he is banking on the hashtag resistance and the leader of it being against that aspect of these talks because Trump was the one who started the talks or who was in the talks. And the neocon Lindsey Graham is going to get some help from Chuck Schumer today in pushing his pro-war agenda. Schumer said by meeting with Kim, Trump has given a brutal and repressive dictatorship the international legitimacy it has long craved. It is best not to dive in head first and hope for the best, but rather to work slowly, transparently, and verifiably to build trust and lock in concessions, Schumer warned. The document is short on details, Schumer said. As we have learned in the wake of the collapse of the 1994 and 2005 agreements, North Korea is liable to backtrack on vague commitments as soon as is in their interests. So that is a right-wing talking point when you say that Trump shouldn't meet with a dictator because he is right-wing and he is brutal in himself. Like, diplomacy shouldn't be on the table or should be very restricted because of the brutality of that dictator. That is a really neoconservative, old-school argument that Chuck Schumer should honestly be ashamed of putting out there into the public discourse. And I heard Lindsey Graham make similar points in his interview. What a hashtag resistance, Chuck Schumer. This is so frustrating to me. If you are a progressive or someone who wants to move towards a more peaceful world, you need to be encouraged by what happened in Singapore. Skeptical? Sure. Definitely, but encouraged. Schumer is siding with neocons like Lindsey Graham on this issue and thus potentially fracturing this fragile peaceful diplomatic situation. Because why? Because Trump is the one who did it? Schumer, you know that if President Obama was the one who made this happen, you would be praising him endlessly. It's no better than Tom Cotton, who is an insane person, an insanely warmongering neocon, going on and siding with Donald Trump on this, which he did today, I believe. So if Obama sat down with Kim and shook his hand, Cotton would have lost his mind and tried to undermine it at all costs, calling him weak, all this stuff. But in this instance, being in favor of the summit actually encourages peace, and going against that does the opposite. Is that the Democratic position? Resist Trump at all costs, even if it means creating more and more conflict in this world? Really? The Democratic position is to side with Lindsey Graham and echo his talking points and link arms with neocons like that guy? Democrats are so obsessed with retaining the moral high ground. That's why people like Al Franken and Eric Schneiderman resigned so quickly after their Me Too scandals. I happen to believe that they should have resigned, but they don't care about the moral high ground when it comes to war, to lives lost. They would rather resist Donald Trump than give him a moderate political victory. This is why regular people hate politics. I happen to think that Trump should get some credit for this meeting, even if I do believe that President Moon was the one who really made this all happen. But it doesn't matter. Just stop playing politics with this. Stop playing with lives. Democrats should be encouraging peace. Always, always, always. But that's not this Democratic Party led by Chuck Schumer. Resist by agreeing with Lindsey Graham.